This happened in the year 2007, when I was in high school. This time, I was just 14 years old. It was a Monday morning during mathematics class. I had a terrible stomach disorder due to the breakfast I had. I quickly asked for permission from our class teacher, Mr. Gabby, to ease myself in the restroom. What I found inside the restroom was very shocking. After 2 minutes inside the restroom, I looked up and saw an open letter pasted on the wall which says, "I'm gonna kill the principal," written and signed by the name Jane Rocker. I was terrified on the spot and became nervous. Who is Jane Rocker? That was the big question that ran through my mind. I have never heard of this name in school. I removed the note and quickly rushed back to the classroom in fear on my face. I showed Mr. Gabby the note I saw inside the restroom. Suddenly, a boy in my class called Ben stood up and said that he had found a similar note inside his school bag 3 days ago. The note says, "Ben, I'm gonna take you away." Ben had reported this to his parents, but the parents never took it seriously, as they believed it was just a playing thing among his friends back at school. Hearing all these, Mr. Gabby quickly rushed to the principal's office to report what was going on. The principal was very shocked and scared. Like, who will not be scared of his death? On the following day, the principal instructed all the teachers in the school to check the note handwriting to see if it could match with any student's handwriting. After 3 hours, we were all called inside the big auditorium. Surprisingly, my friend, Liam Aiden, was called out publicly as the only person that his handwriting matched the culprit's handwriting. Everyone was shocked to have seen Aiden being accused of writing the note because he was such a gentle and good boy in the school. I was shocked and crying with Aiden. Many of us supported him, as a good boy he is. Then the principal dissolved the case. March 8th, 2007, we heard news inside the classroom that Ben was found dead inside his room. He was stabbed 3 times in the neck, but strangely, no knife was found on the spot, and nobody was apprehended. Now, this became a serious issue as everyone got frightened hearing this. I thought to myself, who's next? Now, the school authority called the police to inform them of what is going on in the school, so CCTV were to be made to catch any nefarious activities that may happen in the school premises. A month after the death of Ben, we were inside the classroom when Aiden told me that he wanted to pee, so he asked for permission from our class teacher. After 45 minutes, Aiden never came back to class. Mr. Gabby called me. "Hey Mac, go and check Aiden." April 8th was the most terrifying day of my life. I found Aiden in a pool of blood inside the restroom. He had been stabbed 3 times in the chest. I rushed out to the principal's office, and the police were called immediately. The CCTV in the restroom was investigated, which shows a strange, unrecognized figure with no face. Could this be a ghost? Could the demon mistaken Aiden for the principal? Now, everyone realized that Aiden was accused wrongly, but still, very sad for him. It's very hard for me to forget this horrible moment. The principal resigned, and the school was closed down. This occurred in Tucson, Arizona, in 2003, when I was in my early 20s. My girlfriend and I agreed to play a game of snooker. As a result, we arrived at the game center early and enjoyed chatting with the bartender, Elisa. She was a lovely and interesting woman. This particular night, we walked in and noticed the pool table was occupied. There was a man and woman there playing the game. So my girlfriend went ahead to get us some drinks while I watched. After a few minutes, the man noticed me and struck up a conversation with me. When my girl came over with our drinks, the man asked us if we wanted to play a game with them. It was clear to me at this time that his female companion did not yet say anything, just her name when we introduced ourselves. Well, we agreed to play against them, so he racked up the balls. Fred was the man's name, and Sophia was the girl's name. So shortly after we began playing, Fred began asking me personal questions like where I grew up, where I met my fiancé, how long we've been dating, and if we lived together, among other things. I observed that Fred kept glancing outside every minute. Even though the rest of the talk was nice in nature, I grew more nervous. Strangely, Sophia remained silent and merely frowned. My girlfriend had come closer by the end of the game. Fred asked if we wanted to go to another nightclub right across the street with them. I didn't say anything at first, but he followed up by asking if we were interested in going to a fun bar not far from where we were. My girlfriend and I made eye contact, and before he could respond, I stammered out, "Thank you, Fred, but no, we have a dinner plan." Despite the fact that we had no plans, my girlfriend did not argue with me. She must have noticed my frightened expression. We both grabbed our jackets and went out of the bar. When we got back to the car, my girlfriend asked me what was wrong. I told her I got a horrible feeling from those people and just thought we had to get away from them. I told her it was weird that he asked us to leave with them when the girl, Sophia, didn't say a word throughout the game. Well, my girl sighed and said it's fine. I think she thought I was crazy. 2 days later, when I opened up a newspaper, there was an article on the front page about a woman who was found murdered. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw Elisa, the lovely bartender who had served us a drink 2 days before. She was apparently kidnapped, robbed, and murdered the same night my girlfriend and I were there. Elisa was assassinated. Who murdered Elisa? Her corpse was discovered 4 kilometers away from the bar. I was terrified and thought what a strange coincidence it was, as well as how tragic it was that she had died so terribly. I quickly contacted my girlfriend to tell her what had happened in the bar. Hearing this, she screamed in pain. What a strange world we live in. A week later, a man and woman had just been arrested for the murder of Elisa, the bartender lady, along with the murders of several other people, 4 of whom were couples. There on the front page again were the picture of Fred and Sophia being the serial killers. I was shocked to have seen both of them. Now I got to know the reason why Fred was looking outside every minute, and why we were invited to another bar the previous night. Obviously, this is one of the strategies they use to get their victims. I was sad and terrified reading the article as I kept on imagining the night and depicting the picture of Elisa in my memory. Please do not follow unknown people. I was 23 years old when I finished my college. Then, things got so bad for me and my family financially, as I did not get a job for many months. Let me tell you, this was a frustrating time of my life. Because of this, I got depressed and always stayed in the door many times. Dan, who is my friend, was my motivator. He always encouraged me to cheer up, that things will get better. Fast forwarding to the end of the week, it was a Friday evening when my bell rang 2 times. Surprisingly, it was my friend, Dan. "Hey Dan, how are you?" I asked. Dan told me that we should go out for the weekend. Well, I know Dan was trying to make me feel good because of my situation, so I obliged, and I got dressed up for the outing. We were at a place called Monte Casino, around Texas. We were there having drinks at the casino bar when a man walked up to us and offered to buy us even more drinks. Well, it was all for fun, and because of this, we never thought of refusing the offer. After all, we were outside to have fun, Dan said. I shake my head with a smile. This man was generous with us the whole time, and we really enjoyed his company. He was so fun to be with. After much discussion, we never knew when the time was gone. Lo and behold, it was 1 a.m. By this time, it was almost impossible for us to get a public bus back home, so it looked like we were stranded. So when he invited us to his house by the end of the conversation, we readily agreed to spend the night at his place. Anyway, we went to the parking lot and this man told us to wait outside. By this time, this man was busy having what we thought was a phone conversation with someone inside his car. He seemed to be arguing during the phone conversation, as he was busy making angry hand gestures, but we couldn't hear what he was saying. Well, we could not take this seriously because he can talk to anyone on his phone. 2 minutes later, he started driving us to his house. On our way, I saw something terrifying on this man's head. I saw a huge, green fly circling and buzzing around his head. I whispered to Dan to look at his head of what I saw, but Dan could not see anything. After we got down from the car, he welcomed us to his house. The house is very big and beautiful, but only the compound of the house was lit up. There was no neighboring house because the whole vicinity was dark. Now Dan and I were worried. How come a beautiful house is located here with no neighbors? Dan said to me in a silent tone. As this man stepped forward, both of us now clearly saw the huge green flies still circulating on his head, and now he seemed to be talking to them. Now, we already realized our mistakes. We were so scared. At this point, we had no option. We slowly followed him step by step, but shockingly, as he was trying to open the door, the whole ground was vibrating like when an earthquake wants to start. Again, a deep voice coming from within the house, or maybe it was the house itself, talking. We could not say because we were really under panic. The deep voice said, "How many times have I told you not to bring men into the house?" At this point, we thought it was the end of our lives. We never knew how we managed to jump over the wall and run for our lives. While running, we did not come across any houses, and it was all dark throughout. We felt a lot of people we couldn't see were running after us. After about 10 minutes of running, we got to a nearby road and started to breathe heavily. Here on the road, everything seemed normal. 3 minutes later, we saw a police car coming, and we narrated everything to them. The following day, a police squad accompanied us to locate the place, but sadly, we could not locate the place anymore. Everywhere looked so different. This was a horrible experience for us. Please do not follow unknown people.
My name is Mike, and I'm here to share a story involving a very dangerous and scary situation I went through just the other night on my way to my girl's house. I'm not doing this to cause fear in other members of the sub. I only want to make you all aware of the dangers of driving alone at night, especially when no one else is around. Like I said at the time I had this encounter, I was on the road to my girlfriend's place about 20 miles from mine. Most of the area I had to drive through is heavily developed. However, there's a stretch of roughly 5 miles that is probably just as rough as it was when people settled in the area just after the Civil War. It doesn't really matter how long it's been this way. I'm only attempting to convey the idea that it's completely undeveloped to you. I sometimes get too wrapped up in the history of the area and ramble on about it. I'm sorry about that, and I promise I'll do my best to be brief as possible when giving you the facts of what led up to this occurrence. Regardless of the history of that road, there are no business or houses along that stretch of road, mainly just open fields and woods. Not to mention, at the time of night when I usually am going back and forth on the highway, there are little, if any, cars on that particular stretch. It's usually a quiet and enjoyable part to drive on, and the entire time I've traveled on it, which has to have been hundreds, I never imagined that anything scary or violent could happen to me. Man, was I wrong. That night I'd clocked out just after midnight and sent my girl a quick text to let her know I was on my way. The plan was to spend the night at her place, so after a stop to get gas, I hit the road. That late in the evening, I didn't see many cars going my direction, so I floored it in hopes to get to her house fast. However, just in a matter of minutes, I came up behind 2 cars driving next to each other at a slow speed. I'm not sure what they were doing, and I didn't care. I just wanted one of them to get out of my way so I could continue on my journey. In my haste, I honked at the car ahead of me in the passing lane. I'm not an idiot. I didn't lean on it. I just gave them a sort of beep to announce my presence. To my relief, the car sped up and moved over in front of the other car to allow me to pass. I was thankful to them for doing this, so I gave them a little kind wave. You know, the kind you give to a passing neighbor. Eager to get to my destination, I floored the gas again, but before I could even get 20 feet down the road, the car behind me turned on his brights and blinded me. This made me mad, but I flipped up my rear view mirror and tried to ignore it. If being blinded wasn't bad enough, the driver crossed the line to dangerous. Out of nowhere, I was rammed in the rear and almost lost control of my car. I realized then that I was in big trouble. There didn't seem to be any way to get out of this other than to outrun them, so I put the pedal all the way to the floor and prayed I could get away. Before I could gain enough speed, I was rammed again, this time much harder. My head was thrusted forward and back by the collision. The pain came almost immediately. Thankfully, I was able to pull away and leave the other car behind, but I could still see them about 60 yards in the distance trying to catch me. This was the moment I was saved. Most people wouldn't look forward to being caught speeding, but in the circumstances, I was relieved. I just lost sight of the car in my mirror when everything was lit up with blue and red colors. Overjoyed, I quickly pulled my car over and got out to greet the cop. He was a little nervous when I jumped out of the car, but soon enough I was able to get him to understand what I was doing. When he shined his flashlight on the back of my car, we would see the damage, and it was bad. Of course, both of my taillights were busted and the rear clip was crumpled up like an accordion. I told him what had just happened, and he had me follow him up the road to file a more in-depth report. He told me he'd do his best, but the odds that they'd find the driver were low, and that's what I figured when I made the report. I was just relieved to be alive and out of danger. My neck was still hurting, so my next stop was the emergency room. I called my girl from the waiting room, and she almost had a heart attack when I told her what had happened. She soon met me there, and she made me let her follow me on the drive to her house. Like I expected, I had whiplash. All they could do was give me some prescriptions and tell me to come back if the pain got worse. Despite the sore neck, by the time I finally made it back to her house, I fell asleep instantly. Since then, I've had my girlfriend stay over at my place, and as far as I know, the cops haven't caught the driver. Like I said, I'm not telling you guys this story to scare you. I'm sharing it to remind you to be careful on the road at night and always be mindful of the way you treat other drivers. Just because you don't intend to make them angry doesn't mean they won't get mad.
I spent the first 10 years of my life in Virginia with my grandparents. And being the youngest kid in the family, I was my grandfather's favorite. He constantly wanted me to be with him at all times. We ate together, went on walks together, sat around and did nothing together, and sometimes even slept together. So it's clear that we were pretty close. Something horrible happened on October 5th, 1988. It was approximately 1:30 a.m. on that fateful Wednesday morning. As usual, I was sleeping in my grandfather's room next to him. I was shocked awake by a sudden panic. I had a nightmare seeing around 20 skeletons chasing me as my grandfather sat behind them, watching me as I fled for my life. I was terrified. In this dream, he informed me that the skeletons were his buddies and that they were only fooling around with me. After about 5 minutes, I suddenly opened my eyes and got back to life. I noticed a strange illumination in the room. It was very bright, yet unlike the normal bulb lights. Then I started hearing some clinking sounds, like bottles hitting against each other gently. At this time, I knew something was not right. I felt something was in the room with us. My grandfather was still sleeping, and I was scared to look around to know the source of the noise. But I knew I had to. And slowly, I began to scan the room. And then my eyes went to my grandfather's minibar, which was opposite to where our bed was positioned, where he keeps his alcohol and herbal drinks. And with what I saw, I started sweating profusely, and I got worried. I saw about 10 to 15 men. They were as tiny as pens, all adorned with white flowing robes. Their beards and their hair were so long and white, it flowed like their robes. Their robes and beards illuminated the room. They kept on walking around the bar and aimlessly making the clinking sounds. By this time, I wasn't just looking and observing. I was struggling to scream, but my throat was constricted. I tried to tap my grandfather, but I could not. I was totally paralyzed with fear and became unconscious. I just kept shouting my grandpa's name in my mind. All of a sudden, they all stopped, turned around and stared back at me. Their eyes were bright red, and their looks were so intense and frightful. I didn't know when I started screaming with all my might. A few seconds later, they all vanished. The next day, my grandfather called me aside and asked me to tell him what I had seen. And so I told him everything I saw, and he warned me not to tell anyone. Following that, a few days later, my grandfather died. It took me almost 6 months before I could sleep alone. Now, I'm 49 years old. I've grown up to become a man, more bold and brave. I just thought to myself to narrate my story about what happened 33 years ago. And to this day, I still have no idea of who my grandfather really was.